It's called getting mugged in two installments. Last week, the Minister of Finance, Inigo Dongwana, presented his delayed budget speech. They proposed a 0.5% increase in value added tax for this year and another 0.5% next year, effectively making it a 1% point increase spread over 2 years. That was the sticking point and why the budget speech was delayed. It has been argued by the finance minister that although it will hurt our pockets, it will result in more people actually contributing towards the overall tax basket because the responsibility otherwise would fall on a small pocket of taxpayers. But there's another way. Is there another way to increase tax revenue without hiking value added tax? Koshiek Karan thinks there is. He's an investment banker, financial activist, and founder of BankerX. It's a financial literacy program. We spoke to Koshiek in December last year talking about the remote gambling bill and public comments on how do we curb what has been quite prolific online betting, sports betting, and the like. Good morning, Koshiek. Really appreciate your time. Maybe you could just answer a couple of things for me. Last time we spoke, there was 1.1 trillion rand generated in 2023 in online in the gambling industry in South Africa. A lot of that came from online sports betting. How much of that actually returned to the fiscus?
Yeah. Good morning, Lester, and good morning to your listeners as well. So thanks for having me. And you bang on, Lester. I mean, 1.1 trillion rand was spent on gambling. But here's the thing. Not a lot of money goes back into the hands of the gamblers, let alone the fiscus. I think what's really concerning here is problem gambling is up 500% in 6 years. And 27% of these gamblers rely on social grants. And in terms of the amount recycled, almost 40% of people who play on these platforms never cash out, right? They just keep reinvesting, if you can use that word, their winnings. And what's really concerning for me, Lester, is that, digital betting and the lottery, they thrive in countries like South Africa. You have high income inequality, high unemployment, very low levels of financial literacy, and relentless marketing, right? If you put on any football, rugby, cricket match, you have 2 to 3, sometimes even 4 betting sponsors. You can't even watch the game sometimes, it's just adverts about betting. And so the stats show that the poorest people in South Africa play the lottery and gamble online. Essentially, this is a tax on the poor. And globally, there is a shift to make it more difficult for these companies to operate in their countries. Hence, Africa has been seen as this jewel that's incredibly easy to exploit.
Koshiek, you've suggested a gambling as part of the basket of sin taxes, things that are taxed, of course, alcohol, cigarettes, tobacco, cigars. There was a 6.75% excise increase when it comes to beer this for the next financial year. You're suggesting a sin tax on gambling and lottery. Firstly, how would it work? And who would be paying that sin tax? The gambler and winnings? Or is it the company that's making revenue, making real bank with, as you say, plenty of South Africans playing lotteries and betting online?
Yeah, and that's an excellent question, Lester, because, who actually foots the bill here? And here's the thing. I'm a firm believer in the free market and, having people exercise their choices. I don't believe that, anything comes good for me in nanny states and being excessively prohibitive. And here's the thing. If you tax the end product, you end up triggering a black market and underground gambling. And the fancy term for gambling dependency is inelastic demand in South Africa. So if you make scratch cards more expensive, you won't reduce the number of people buying them. And that's because desperation is a stronger motivation than either greed or entertainment. And so these taxes or levies, rather, need to be considered on profits, and they need to be targeted for rehabilitation, player education, and you can even look at an avenue where you make advertising more expensive. One large betting company made 7.6 billion rand in Africa last year. And so my view is if you are exploiting a market, you should be willing to pay for that damage. And it's no different to companies in mining, for instance, that have rehabilitation provisions that have to go and develop the land after they're done mining. And so it's very much balanced, and you've got to go after the companies and not the players itself.
Yeah. Well, the question is ring fencing, and how do you ring fence? Do you ring fence only for education and rehabilitation, or do you not ring fence and it just goes to the big mattress at the treasury and can be used for anything from roads to hospitals? And unfortunately, the reality of this country also corruption, because lots of that money gets siphoned off into the greedy abyss of politicians and those connected to grand corporate and state corruption. Koshiek?
Yeah, 100%. And listen, I think, I want to be very clear on this. South Africa does not have a revenue problem. It has a cost and spending problem, right? You can't tax your way to prosperity. We have in South Africa a massive problem of corruption, wasteful expenditure, expensive salaries for ministers, a bloated cabinet, municipalities that constantly fail their audits. And so you can raise taxes to infinity, it won't fix it. And so, we can tax gambling companies, but it actually means absolutely nothing if the money doesn't reach the intended recipients and you're facing corruption and fiscal mismanagement. So, slight detour, but, concept like or similar to Doge that's being implemented in the US is something that could potentially work in South Africa, depending on how it's implemented.
Look, we have organizations similar to Doge. We have a public protector, we have an auditor general, we have a standing committee on public accounts, we have a special investigative unit who does show regular successes, does uncover and exposes the rot at what happens after that, the political will to actually address this. I think that's our issue. We already know what our problems are. We just need to actually work on them.
100%, Lester. I mean, it's a question of accountability and consequences. If you and I knew we could rob a bank without any consequences and have a get out of jail free card, well, I guess you and I will be spending our morning discussing heists. And so unless you have consequences and proper accountability for these actions, I don't think we're going to get anywhere as a country, to be honest.
Koshiek Karan, really appreciate your time, investment banker and financial education activist. Your thoughts, a syntax on gambling, or at least the gambling industry. 1.1 trillion rand generated in gambling in South Africa in 2023. Not a lot of that found its way, firstly, back into the pockets of punters, but also into the fiscus.